Here's an 800-word expansion of Episode 1, the 250-mile drive that left them speechless, in English without headings. I still remember the morning vividly, the air heavy with tension and the kind of quiet that makes your chest ache. My sister-in-law had exploded at my mother the night before, her voice sharp and unforgiving, echoing through the house like a whip cracking. "Get out," she had shouted, pointing at Mom with such venom that even my brother, who usually reacted to everything, merely smirked as if watching a scene in a movie. The sheer audacity of it had left me stunned, but what burned inside me more was the absolute indifference my brother displayed. Mom, ever fragile in such confrontations, had simply shrunk into herself, shoulders hunched, lips trembling. Seeing her like that was unbearable. I spent the night wrestling with a storm of thoughts. How could someone act so cruel to the person who had raised them? How could my own brother, whose eyes I had once trusted, stand there and watch as if nothing was happening? The anger inside me was visceral, a red-hot fire that made sleep impossible. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would not let them continue like this, and I would show them that some actions have consequences. Without saying a word, I packed a small bag, loaded the car, and set off. The drive was long, a grueling 250 miles that gave me plenty of time to reflect on everything. At first, the road seemed endless, stretching into a blur of asphalt and sky, and my mind replayed the previous night's confrontation over and over. I could hear her voice in my head, sharp, cutting, full of anger. I could see my mother's face, pale and withdrawn, trying not to cry. The contrast between the cruelty displayed and the stoic patience of Mom fueled my determination. I knew they had underestimated me, thought my silence was weakness, but they had no idea what was coming. As I drove, I rehearsed what I would do, though in truth, I didn't need a plan. My presence alone would make them uncomfortable. I imagined pulling up to their house, walking through the door with calm confidence, and letting them see, really see, that actions have repercussions. I wanted my sister-in-law to recognize that shouting, belittling, and humiliating someone would not go unnoticed. I wanted my brother to understand that smirking and doing nothing in the face of injustice was just as complicit as the yelling. By the time I reached their neighborhood, the sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I parked a short distance from the house, letting the engine idle for a moment as I collected myself. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the anticipation of seeing their reaction. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and walked towards the front door. I could already see movement through the window, my sister-in-law, flustered, glancing nervously, my brother frozen mid-smirk, suddenly uncertain. I knocked once, sharply, and waited. The door opened, just enough for them to see me, and the expressions on their faces were priceless. The smirk on my brother's face faltered immediately, replaced with confusion and a flicker of apprehension. My sister-in-law's mouth opened, perhaps to shout, but no words came out. Her eyes widened as she realized that the person she had tried to intimidate had not only returned but had come with a presence that could not be ignored. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my movements deliberate and calm, every step a silent message of authority. The house felt smaller, the air tense with the kind of silence that screams louder than words. I didn't raise my voice, didn't demand apologies. I simply walked past them, making sure they saw that my mother had my support. Mom, still standing in the background, looked at me with a mixture of relief and disbelief. She had thought I might be too far, too busy, or too indifferent to intervene, but I was there, and my presence was enough to shift the balance of power in the room. What followed was not dramatic yelling or confrontation. It was something far more effective. My sister-in-law tried to recover her composure, opening her mouth to speak, but the words faltered. My brother, who had been so smug, found himself unable to maintain the facade. Their silence, their uncertainty, spoke volumes. Without a single raised voice, without a single harsh word, I had made them pale with realization. The tables had turned, and the quiet authority I carried was more powerful than any shout or smirk could ever be. Mom stepped forward then, slowly, tentatively, but with growing confidence. She looked at them, saw the change, and for the first time in a long while, she held herself tall. I could feel her relief radiating, her shoulders relaxing, her breathing steadier. They had underestimated the bond and support between family members. The drive, the thought, the preparation, it had all led to this moment, where justice didn't require confrontation but merely presence and calm resolve. By the time I left, the atmosphere in the house had changed. My mother walked beside me, smiling softly, and I knew that moment had shifted the dynamic forever. They had been shown, without cruelty or vengeance, that mistreatment would not go unnoticed. And for me, the 250 miles had been more than just a drive. They had been a journey of determination, courage, and the quiet assertion of what is right. The tension that lingered in the house after the events of the previous day was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. My brother, usually so self-assured and smug, had been reduced to a quiet observer, his smirk fading into uncertainty. My sister-in-law, still flushed with anger from her outburst at Mom, had no idea how quickly the dynamics were about to change. I had already driven 250 miles to confront the situation, not with anger, but with a presence that demanded respect. The look on their faces when I entered had been priceless, a mix of disbelief, fear, and the dawning realization that they had underestimated me entirely. But the real shock had not yet come. I watched them closely, every twitch, every glance revealing their growing unease. My sister-in-law opened her mouth, probably to try to regain control, but the words never came. My brother's eyes darted between us, as if searching for some escape route that did not exist. I had expected this, anticipated their attempts to regain composure, and prepared myself to stay calm. I knew that the real power of this moment lay not in confrontation but in demonstrating that their actions would no longer dictate the narrative. Their smirks and arrogance had been dismantled simply by my presence and unwavering support for Mom. Mom, who had been so timid and afraid just the night before, now seemed to gather strength from my arrival. She straightened, her eyes meeting mine, silently asking if I was ready to support her. I nodded, just slightly, and that small gesture seemed to ignite a courage in her that I had never seen before. She stepped forward, her voice steady but calm. "You will not speak to me, or anyone else in this house, that way again," she said. The words were simple, but their weight was immense. My sister-in-law froze mid-step, and even my brother, who had always been quick with dismissive remarks, fell silent. It was surreal to witness. The air seemed to crackle with the shock of realization that authority and respect could exist without aggression or shouting. My sister-in-law, who had relied on volume and intimidation, had nothing left to wield against us. My brother, who had believed that smirking and doing nothing could protect him from accountability, suddenly realized that his complacency had consequences. The room was filled with a tense silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes every movement seem amplified. Every glance and gesture carried meaning. Their shock was not merely at my arrival, but at the fact that their previous behavior had been ineffective against the combined presence of support and moral certainty. As I stood there, I reflected on how long this moment had been coming. Months, perhaps years, of watching them treat Mom with disdain and indifference had built up inside me. The drive, the preparation, the mental rehearsal of what would happen when I confronted them, all of it had led to this exact instant. And now, as I watched their faces pale and eyes widen, I realized that patience and calm determination were far more powerful than any angry outburst. I did not need to yell. I did not need to argue. The shock on their faces said it all. They began to fumble for excuses, murmuring half-formed sentences, attempting to explain away their behavior. I did not respond, did not acknowledge their words. Every attempt to justify themselves only emphasized their mistake. The more they tried, the more apparent it became that they had crossed a line they could not recover from. The room felt smaller, tighter, as the tension pressed in from every corner. Their previous confidence had evaporated, replaced by a dawning recognition that they were not in control. For once, they were powerless to dictate the situation. Mom, now standing beside me, radiated quiet strength. I could see the relief in her eyes, the gratitude she did not need to speak aloud. This was her moment to reclaim her dignity, and I was merely the catalyst, the presence that ensured the balance of respect shifted. It was a powerful realization that sometimes the most dramatic change comes not from confrontation, but from silent, unwavering support and the courage to act when the moment demands it. After several long minutes that felt like hours, my sister-in-law slumped slightly, her energy spent. My brother's smirk had completely vanished, replaced with the realization that his indifference had consequences he could not avoid. The atmosphere had shifted completely. What had been a house dominated by arrogance, intimidation, and smugness now belonged to clarity, fairness, and quiet authority. Their shock was complete, absolute, and deserved. By the time I left that day, their expressions were a mix of lingering disbelief and grudging recognition. Mom walked beside me, no longer timid, her steps steady and confident. I knew that the memory of this moment would stay with them, a reminder that actions have consequences, that cruelty and indifference are never invisible, and that even the smallest gestures of support can create the most profound change. The Smirks had turned to shock, as they had never expected to see the consequences of their behavior so clearly. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. Not from victory over them, but from knowing that Mom had regained her dignity, that her voice had been respected, and that the power dynamic had shifted forever. That day proved, beyond a shadow of doubt, that courage and presence could achieve what anger and shouting never could. The shock they experienced was well earned, and it would linger, a quiet reminder that their actions had meaning and that they could no longer take advantage of those they underestimated.